the man who had the pleasure and privilege of his association with Winx and is the winner of the silver saddle from yesterday's Shergar Cup, is with me now. Hugh Bowman, you were glued to that. It never gets old, does it? It never gets old.
Hi, Nick. No, it doesn't. I wouldn't say I'm pulling the replays out every other day.
No.
But it's nice to... It's actually been nice to talk about Winx. Obviously, she's been hot topic for all the media since I've arrived for this week's Shergar Cup, and it is really nice to think back and, you know, just remember what a special time it was for me and my family and all of us involved with her. She was really quite a, well, it's there for everyone to see, very special horse.
And I do realise that your career is Winx and so much more, and maybe more to come, probably more to come, particularly with what you're doing in Hong Kong. But are you happy to be known as the guy that rode Winx,
well, I think
primarily?
It's a good question, because obviously I am, but to answer that in more depth, you know, as a kid dreaming of being a jockey and then dreaming of winning a Melbourne Cup or a Doncaster, for the first decade of my riding career, you know, I dreamed of winning the big races. But after some time riding against the best horses, the best jockeys, and working my way up the ladder, so to speak, it's sort of my desire to win the big races sort of shifted a little bit more to maybe riding a champion racehorse rather than focusing on races, and that came around the time that my good friend Nash Rawiller was riding Piero and More Joyous for Gay Waterhouse, who you just mentioned was here recently. But not soon after that, Winx came along, and, you know, all my dreams were realised, because she was literally probably at the time the best horse in the world.
Did it become obvious to you quite quickly what was unfolding?
No, not at all. I mean, the first time I rode her, she won a Group 2 3-year-old fillies race. She'd already won 2 or 3 races by that stage, and it was a journey that built and developed. And it wasn't until probably she beat the best field she met in Hull was her first Cox Plate win, 2015, when she beat Highland Reel and Criterion. I think the writing was on the wall that day. She won the race in track record time, and, you know, from then it just really blossomed.
And it's not just the ability to be able to do that, but it was the repetition. And the repetition almost became freakish, because you've ridden so many good horses. They can do something spectacular one day, and the rest of the time they're just pretty good. Well,
that was where Winx was different, because she was good all the time, and she was good for a long period of time. I mean, she was racing at the same time as Enable here in the UK, another amazing horse. But Enable couldn't deliver at every start. I mean, when she was great, she was unbeatable, but she didn't do it every time she went to the races, and Winx did. And she did it for 4 years, and, you know, she was beautifully managed by Chris Waller, of course, and I think that had a lot to do with the longevity and the success that we saw. But ultimately it was same as riding. I did my job, but we were working with an unbelievable athlete, and she just delivered every time.
What makes Chris Waller good at what he does?
Well, he's very patient. He's, you know, like any good businessman or good trainer, his attention to detail is second to none. His work ethic is second to none. And he's patient when he needs to be patient, but he pushes when he needs to push. And he's got an amazing ability to get the best out of the people around him. And he's a very good listener.
And for you, during that period, when you were really in the eye of the media storm, when Winx was getting towards milestone after milestone after milestone, and another Cox Plate, and more of this and more of that, and she almost became too valuable to touch. You as the guy on top, how did it feel?
Well, it's hard to describe, it's hard to put into words, but it was a journey that we were in. It was a bit like being in a bubble, so to speak, and it wasn't as though I was just landed with the job at the end of the road. I mean, I built with it, we all did. In the end, it was the expectation was actually unrealistic, and I think when the retirement finally came, it was like you know, it was so satisfying that she got through with that unbeaten record. I mean, not that she went through her entire career unbeaten, but once the win started to build and it started to get close to Black Caviar's record of 23 wins, I think she had from 23 starts, unbeaten in her whole career. But, you know, Winx's career started very soon after Black Caviar's retirement, and so people expected this to happen, but it's unrealistic, and it literally is. It's even the best of the best can't do it.
This is 2018, and this is toward the end of her career. Another Cox Plate, and just the enthusiasm that she's still showing for it.
Sure.
Remarkable, particularly for a mare.
Well, this is the thing. It's a good point you make. You know, there was top horses she was beating that had gone to stud and had foals before she retired. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And she gathered the attention of the country. You know, she was a household name. Still is, actually. Those Bambian pages have grown up a bit since then, haven't they? But you know, she still is a household name, actually. So it was an amazing journey.
Now, you're everyone who is a British sports fan or an Australian sports fan is familiar with the fact that kind of trash talking each other is a rite of passage. You know,
sure.
It's what we all do all the time. You know, McGrath's just done the 5-0 Ashes prediction yet again. But how conscious were you, particularly with social media, of what the conversation here was in parts, or the narrative was, i.e. they're bottling, not bringing her here, and/or, well, she's just beating up the same old rubbish in Australia? How conscious of that were you, and how much did it bother you?
Well, I spoke about being in the bubble before, and, you know, my role was to ride her. So I didn't need to get into any politics or any decisions because that wasn't my area. So it was of no concern of mine. I mean, if she got on the plane and came here or went to Dubai or Hong Kong or for a Breeders' Cup, you know, I mean, there was plenty of options there for her, as you can imagine. But that wasn't my department, so I didn't have to worry about it. So that's how I handled it.
By contrast, although she didn't travel as some would have liked her to, you're someone who, it strikes me, has always had a slightly restless spirit in that regard, or should I say inquisitive spirit? Is it because you want to experience racing around the world? You came, I remember your first stint here, which was...
Well, I rode here in 2007.
Yeah, and nearly 20 years ago now.
Yeah, time moves along, doesn't it? But, yeah, and then I travelled to Hong Kong in 2014, and I found that every time I did travel, I went home a more accomplished human being and more accomplished jockey. So I think, you know, I would advise any young person, whether they're in racing or not in racing or whatever their position is, I would advise anyone to travel if they were given the opportunity, because it'll, you know, it helps. I'm
interested that you say a more accomplished human being as well as a more accomplished jockey. In what way? Just flesh that out for me.
Well, I think you mature and you find yourself. I think, you know, it's easy to stay at home and do what you do and stay in your comfort zone and find your level, and, you know, whatever level that is. But if you get out of, if you travel, you know, you have no choice but to get out of your comfort zone. You have to make more effort with people. If you go to a foreign country, like I've spent time in Japan, you have to, you know, make effort with the language, even though it's not my area, but you have to make effort. You have to make effort that you don't make at home. And it's good for you. And
your background was so steeped in the horse and racing, and, you know, father and ancestors were, you know, very accomplished horse people as well.
Yeah, they were indeed. I'm not from a racing family. There's certainly race horses within the family, and my father was an amateur jockey.
But animals are there all the time.
Well, I grew up on a farm in western New South Wales, about 5 hours northwest of Sydney. My parents and ancestors are graziers, farmers, so cattle and sheep and horses were a day-to-day part of my life growing up. And you know, being chosen the career path that I have done, and Christine and I have lived in Sydney for most of our life, since, you know, we've obviously travelled the world as well. But that's one thing that, you know, I haven't had the opportunity to we haven't had the opportunity to give our girls, is that farm upbringing, because it's been all business with the horse racing.
So how do you look back on that farm upbringing? Do you look on it fondly?
I certainly do. Obviously, I think I had a great childhood, you know, a very close family, and very lucky for that. But I think the life with animals in my early years has really helped me develop. You know, I've obviously chosen to be a jockey and worked very hard at it since leaving school at 17. But I think the upbringing I had with mustering cattle and sheep and yard work, and just understanding their idiosyncrasies, like, I think it certainly helped with my narrative of riding in races.
And did you always feel, so the ambition to be a jockey, you said you began the journey in earnest at 17. Had it been the ambition from when you were little?
I'd say I went to boarding school when I was 12.
How was that?
That was good.
Tough?
Good. I was a bit tough at the start, you know, you miss mum and dad. But I look back at those years with really fond memories, actually. But it was when I left the farm to go to Sydney to school, I thought if I never see another horse again, it'll be too soon, because I'd ridden so much. But when I was away from them, within 6 or 8 months, I think mum and dad came to Sydney for a weekend during the term and took us to Randwick. And my sister's a couple of years younger than me, so she wasn't at boarding school yet. But we went to Randwick and I knew straight away. So I would have been about 12 or 13.
What was it?
Oh, when the jockeys came out, and just everything. When the jockeys walked out to get on the horses, and then the sound of the hoos coming down the Randwick Straight, it was, yeah, I knew straight away what I wanted to do.
Did you like the idea of the show, the theatre of it, as well as the competition of it?
Possibly. I didn't think that much into it, but I knew what I wanted.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So then 17, you go and you train and you're away.
Well, I was obviously, you know, I didn't start to work towards being a jockey at that stage. I continued on with my schooling, as any young kid would. And when I was old enough, Dad had a couple of old picnic horses. So in the school holidays, he'd get them ready and we'd do barrier trials, and so I could get an amateur licence. But of course, I'd never, like I said, we weren't really a racing family.
So what's a picnic horse? Is that for a particular
For
type
amateur racing.
Right, okay.
So in Australia, we have picnic racing.
Yep.
So that's for amateur jockeys or approved riders. And so in the school holidays, but because the stewards didn't really, well, they knew Dad, and obviously the family's owned horses for many years. But they'd never seen me. I'd never worked in a stable. I did all my gallops in the paddock, and I'd never jumped out of the barriers. And I got to the trials in my cowboy boots and my 10-gallon hat, and I started doing trials, and I did about 20 trials over the course of 6 to 8 months, and got an amateur licence. And in the school holidays, I'd ride in the picnics. So thank goodness you don't have footage of that, because
somebody must have it somewhere.
I was pretty green. I have seen it.
Somebody must have it somewhere.
It's locked away.
So who was it? Who would you credit with taking this diamond in the rough and burnishing it?
Well, I think my father had the foresight. Certainly, probably even before I did, actually. Not that I was ever pressured to do anything. I did have to ride the horses, but he didn't push me into racing. But, you know, when I think of it now, looking back, I used to play a lot of polo cross, so the competitiveness of that was, you know, I really enjoyed it. Because when I was 10 or 11 playing football, I was too small and didn't get much of a go. But on the horse, I was more of an equal, because my size didn't matter. was good on the horse. Dad always had the horses in tip-top condition for us, which obviously makes a big difference. So, yeah, I think back to then. But to answer your question, I think my father and mother were really instrumental in shaping me, you know, as a young man. And then once I started riding, they, you know, obviously I went to boarding school, as I said, but once I started riding, they didn't interfere. They just, I'm sure Dad wanted to at times, but he really didn't. He just let I had Billy Aspros and Leanne, who I was apprenticed to. Billy Aspros, a champion jockey in Central West New South Wales, Group 1 winning rider. And I was apprenticed to them, so I had a really good grounding when I started as an apprentice jockey in, when was it, 1997.
What do you think the best thing a trainer can do for an apprentice jockey?
I don't think you can answer that with one. You know, there's no one answer. I think to start with, the kid needs the ambition and the drive. You know, it's got to come from the individual. But the guidance, I think hard work never killed anybody, particularly as a youngster. And, you know, there's a balance between hard work and overdoing it, I guess. But, you know, I don't think hard work hurt anyone. Discipline and punctuality is very important.
Why that last point so much? Why would you stress that so much? What does it tell you about somebody?
Well, I think if you're punctual, it means you're you know, you're focused. You're ready to go.
You're on the ball.
Yeah. And my second boss, Ron Quinton, he was very. So I was apprenticed with another jockey at the time, Mitch Newman, who was Sydney's champion apprentice at the time, and you know, coming from the country in Bathurst, where I started with Leanne and Billy, they were, you know, they kicked me off, and it was great living with a jockey to start with, to understand how a jockey lives, managing weight, cleaning gear, just those little disciplines that Billy taught me. I took those to Sydney, but then in Sydney there's more staff, track times are quintessential, so you know, work was much easier once I got to Sydney. But Ron was hell-bent on punctuality, so that's where I learnt that.
Because racing is so relentless, and because you're now, particularly in Hong Kong, somewhere that is so electric, energetic, vibrant, throughout your career, to what extent have you always had that little piece of the farm in you to keep you centred? And has it worked? Well,
I wouldn't say I've been 100% centred the whole way. I mean, you know, when you know, there's a lot of emotion with being a jockey, a lot of emotion, a lot of adrenaline, and we all experience at different levels. And I am pretty laid back by nature, there's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean I don't, you know, just because I don't do the Frankie jump off the horse or the, you know, singing to the crowd, or, you know, I don't get too carried away, but it doesn't mean I don't feel the emotion of winning and riding good horses. And, you know, that's what really drives us, the riding the good horses.
Yeah, I wouldn't have you down as a taciturn person. You're quite, you can express yourself.
At times, but you know, I try not to get too high. You know, when things are going well, when the ball's bouncing in your hand, which it does, it's important not to get too carried away as when things aren't going well, because you have your bad runs too. So you've got to be able to. It's very easy to hit the ground running and be punctual and up and about when the wind's in your sails. But when things aren't going so well, it's important to be able to pick yourself up and keep on the road, because it's a long road and it's got plenty of turns, and you just got to stick at it.
How is a top-level sportsman before they're married with children different to a top-level sportsman who's married with children, in terms of sort of managing yourself, your mind, your balance of responsibility, your ability to focus on the job?
Yeah, it changes a lot. Your motivation changes, and your goals, and you know, having kids is you know, I mean, it's one of the best things in life. It's the best thing in life. But you know, I suppose it comes at a time when you're older too, so you're more mature. But certainly, kids changes your perspective of life. There's no doubt about it, and you have more responsibility. So interestingly, Winx's win in the Queensland Oaks, which is the second of her 33 successive wins, was the same month that our second daughter Paige was born. So for the first 4 years of her life, Bambi was 19 months older. That journey sort of began then and went for the next 4 years, and it wasn't till well after retirement that I realised how vacant I'd been on the family front during that time because of what was going on. And Christine rode all the emotions with me, of course, but she also kept things grounded at home, whereas I was a little bit absent. But
you hadn't realised that when you were in the moment?
No, I didn't.
When you took one step back, you realised...
Well, probably at the time COVID hit, I suppose, and I couldn't travel anymore because I was riding in Japan on regular contracts and travelling to Hong Kong, you know, probably once a month through those years. And, yeah, it's really interesting when I look back on it. You know, it all sort of came at one time. But, yeah, when COVID hit and no one could travel, you know, I think it brought us back, or brought me back anyway. But fortunately, I had her there to keep the ship nice and settled throughout. But yeah, it's interesting when you look back on things a little bit like you asked before. What do you get out of? You know, we're talking about travelling overseas. It's the same sort of thing. You don't realise what you're learning when you're on the journey, but when you get back home, you realise the benefits that you've gained from getting yourself out of your comfort zone.
However closely you've observed racing in Hong Kong, I don't think anyone who hasn't ridden there at the top level could really understand and appreciate the sheer difference of it, could they?
No, I don't think so. And I didn't really myself either. I mean, I went there on a short-term contract in 2014. So Bambi was a year old, and I'd been there for a couple of international meetings and ridden in the Jockey Challenge a couple of times, but well, I had some luck there, but yeah, that's when it opened my eyes. It was just it's a different environment altogether. It's so competitive, highly competitive. I'd say on average the standard of horse wouldn't be quite at the level that I'd be used to riding in Sydney, but that doesn't matter. Because it's a small environment, small horse population. They race on 2 tracks only, and they race twice a week, so it's very condensed. The ratings of the horses are very close, so for a jockey, you've got to be right on because, you know, that makes a big difference.
What is the relationship like between the jockeys in Hong Kong? Because there's so few of you. There's so few of you that have come from other international jurisdictions, well, relatively speaking.
They make a point of having an international jockeys room.
Yeah.
And so there's South African riders, there's Caris's from Mauritius, obviously, French, English, there's Italian. Andre Atzini's there now, done really well. I think he'll do even better next year. I think the last 12 months, you know, I can see he's really got a grip on the place. And so it is a very international jockeys room, and I feel there's quite a good camaraderie. You do have the king, Zach Purton, the self-announced king. But I have to, you know, to do what he's done over so long has to be respected because the pace is intense, and to be able to sustain that intensity over 2 decades like he has is quite remarkable, actually. You said the self-anointed king with a little smile on your face. Is it your job then to challenge that, to challenge
his aura of invincibility that he's created very effectively?
Well, it's my personality hasn't led itself to be that type of person. Actually, I don't. It's a bit like riding in a race. If you go into a race with your visions on one horse and one horse only, it's a very quick way to bring yourself undone. You have to respect the system. You have to respect, you know, and I'm talking generally, but you know, the best chance I have of challenging Zach is to be the best I can be. Mm-hmm. It's not thinking about him. So the difficulty I have with that is I'm really a bit too heavy. My minimum weight's 124 pounds. If I could ride 122, 2 pounds lighter, you know, that might make things interesting, but I really still think I'd need time. You know, I don't think that'd be enough. It might make things interesting, but at the end of the day, all I can focus on is being the best I can be, and the rest will look after itself.
What do you think everybody else makes of it? Makes of his legend, if you like? The other jocks?
Well, I think...
Is it enough to intimidate them?
Well, he doesn't intimidate me, but he might intimidate others. I mean, he's got a very strong personality, and he shows that in his riding. Very competitive, but get him away from the races, get him on the golf course, he's just like the rest of us. Very relaxed, he'd do anything for you, you know, very helpful. He's very organised, but when it's game day, he's like any top-level athlete, but he's got that, you know, he voices his opinion, and then he moves on. So, like I said, he's done it for a long time. He you know, ultimately he was the one that took Douglas White off his mantle after a 13-year reign, and you know, two legends of the sport. I rode against them both, and you know, Zach was the changing of the guard, and no one, you know, Joe Moreira challenged him for a few years, and he's one of the best jockeys I've ever ridden against. He's unbelievable, but he couldn't sustain the longevity in Hong Kong like Zach has.
Because you need that absolute psychological granite as well as the talent in the saddle.
Of course.
Who is your idea of the ideal jockey?
Well, everyone has different characteristics that, you know, stand them, you know, that make them great. All the great jockeys have different things they're good at. So it's a very broad question, but I think temperament has got a lot to do with it, and the ability to back yourself. All the top all the leading riders they'll back their own judgment.
Who do you think manifests that best?
Well, I think, there's no one. There's many top jockeys. They're all good at it. They might have different ways of portraying it, but they all back themselves. They're all focused. They all do their homework, and they're all fit.
For you, beyond this next year in Hong Kong, how far are you looking?
How long's a piece of string? You know, I'm 45 years old, so I've still got some good years in me. I suppose you're only ever a good horse away from another season, aren't you? I mean, we've just spoken about Zach at length, and he's been talking retirement for the last decade or so. But I can't see him retiring while Ka Ying Rising's in.
You'll have to carry him out.
I don't see him retiring while Ka Ying Rising's racing, and so, you know, I'm certainly in the twilight of my career, and it's been a fantastic move to Hong Kong. So, you know, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to go there, and we've moved our family and we've settled in well. So,
how are they all doing there? Because again, the adapting as a young family is not a walk in the park.
Well, our kids were. Bambi and Paige were maybe, you know, we've been there 2.5 years, so they were maybe 7 and 8 when we moved, 7 and 9. So I think it was a great age. I think it would have been much more difficult if we'd have moved there if they're in their early teens, for instance.
How into the racing are they?
Well, they like the trophies, so I'd love to leave them for you, Nick. But I've made the mistake of giving trophies away before, and that's a big no-no. So they like the trophies, and I think yesterday was great for them because they're at an age now where they can understand the event and the competition and the fanfare. Whereas before we went to Hong Kong, they probably weren't quite at an age to really grasp it. And then in Hong Kong, obviously, if you're under 18, you're not allowed on the racecourse. So, I mean, it's a bit hard for them there, but it is what it is. But they watch with interest at home with Christine.
Either a rider of the...
They can both ride horses. They haven't obviously had the childhood I had with riding. But both of them are interested in riding, and whenever they get the opportunity to go to the farm and ride, they both take it with both hands. So, in time, if they want to pursue horses, both of them have got the grounding to pick it up pretty swiftly.
How does Daddy, I want to be a jockey sound?
I would encourage them to do whatever they want to do. I wouldn't push them into it by any means, but I wouldn't, if that's what they wanted to do, I'd support their decisions. But at the moment, they're kids, and, it's lovely to see them being kids. And, I don't know where the last 10 years has gone, so I can only imagine the next 10 is going to be probably quicker. So we'll enjoy them while they're young and, let them develop into the young ladies that they're going to be.
Much as we began this conversation, much as your mum and dad did for you.
Exactly.
Gave you the grounding, but gave you the freedom.
They did. Yep, and give them the grounding, and hope when it's time for them to make decisions in life that they make good ones.
Well, many of yours have been excellent ones. I know you're going to stay with us as the guys come back, but for the moment, Hugh Bowman, thanks so much.
You're welcome, Nick.
We're going to take a break.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.